Welcome to this Arnall-Culliford Knitwear tutorial on deciphering cable charts. This video is part of our Year of Techniques series, 12 knitting patterns to help you upgrade your knitting skills. This month's project is the Yellow Wagtail Scarf by Sarah Hatton, and in this video I'm going to walk you through how to read directly from the knitting chart to know what to do when you're cabling both with and without a cable needle. In learning how to read straight from the chart symbol, you can speed up your knitting because you're not constantly having to refer back to the key all the time. So I'm going to show you how to read the cable symbols from the chart using a cable needle. So our chart is a visual representation of our knitting. The easiest bits to follow are these knit over knit crosses. This one here is this section of knitting here, so you've got 2 knit stitches crossing 2 knit stitches and they're leaning towards the right. And you can see these two on top of each other here are these 2 crosses up here. So we've worked that one up there and then we've started the chart again at the bottom and worked that one there. And we're now working across row 7. So we're ready to work these 2 cables here. The first question that you have to ask yourself is how many stitches are involved in the cable in total, and you do that by looking at how many stitches wide the cable symbol is. So this cable symbol here is 3 stitches wide in total, so that's how many stitches the whole of the cable will use. The next question is how many stitches do I need to put onto my cable needle? In order to work that out, we need to follow the diagonal down, and we can then see that these 2 stitches that I've highlighted are the ones that will be going onto the cable needle because they're the ones that will be crossing. So it's always the group of stitches on the right hand side that will be going onto the cable needle. So we could slip our 2 stitches onto the cable needle. The next question is, will the cable needle be held at the front of the work or at the rear of the work? And when the cable itself leans towards the left, as this one does, that means that you're holding your cable needle at the front of the work. Which makes sense because these 2 stitches you can see will be crossing over the stitch behind, so it needs to be at the front. Then your final question is how many stitches are then left to work in the cable and what will you be doing with them? So if you've got 3 in total and 2 are on the cable needle, that means we've just got 1 stitch remaining that will be worked straight from the left-hand needle. And as we look across the cable symbol, it tells us whether we're knitting or purling, or indeed doing something more complicated. So we just work across in order. So there's a purl dot there on the right-hand side. That means that that first stitch off the left needle will be purled, and we will then be knitting the 2 stitches from the cable needle. So how many stitches in total? How many are on the cable needle? It's held at the front because the cable leans to the left. We then have 1 stitch remaining, so that 1 stitch is going to be purled because there's a purl dot, and then we knit the 2 off the cable needle. So our 2 stitches are being held at the front of the work on the cable needle. We then purl 1 from the left-hand needle, and then we knit the 2 from the cable needle, and hopefully we can see that these 2 knit stitches are crossing over, leaning to the left, 1 purl stitch which is hiding in behind there. So again, the next cable is also worked over a total of 3 stitches. So how many stitches do we put on the cable needle? Well, it's always the first group on the right hand side that go on the cable needle. So this time it's just one stitch going on the cable needle. Are we going to hold the cable needle to the front or the back? We're now leaning towards the right, so the cable needle is going to be held at the rear of the work. So we can slip one stitch onto the cable needle and hold it at the rear of the work. Right and rear obviously begin with the same letter, so that makes it quite easy to remember. We then look across to work out how many stitches we need to work off the left needle. So again, there's 3 in total, one's on the cable needle, so we're going to work 2 stitches off the left needle, and these 2, there's no symbol in that diagonal part of the cable symbol, so these 2 are knitted, and then the stitch off the cable needle will be purled because there's a purl dot at the end there, so it's worked knit, knit, purl across the cable. We've got 1 stitch on the cable needle at the rear of the work. We're then going to knit the 2 from the left hand needle, and then purl 1 from the cable needle. And again, hopefully we can see that we've got the smooth knit stitches leaning towards the right and the 1 purl stitch on the end, so that our knitting resembles the cable symbol on our chart. We've worked across now and we are on the last part of the row where we're going to work a cable from chart B, again on row 7. So this is our cable symbol here, and we're going to quickly run through again how to work it. So question 1 is how many stitches are involved in the cable? This one's worked across the full width of the chart, which is 6 stitches in total. So how many of those are going onto our cable needle? We need to see how they're divided, and we do that by following the diagonal line of the cable. Down there. And it's the right hand group of stitches that go onto the cable needle, which is these 3 here. So there are 6 in total, 3 are going onto the cable needle. The cable's leaning towards the right, which means that the cable needle will be held at the rear of the work. And if we look across the cable symbol, there are no purl dots, no other symbols involved, it's all just plain, which tells us that all of the stitches are knitted. So we slip 3 to the cable needle. We're holding them at the rear of the work because the cable leans to the right. And there were no other symbols in the cable itself, so all of the stitches are knitted. So we knit 3 from the left hand needle. And then we knit 3 from the cable needle. And again we can see now that our 3 knit stitches have been taken across the work leaning towards the right, and there are 3 knit stitches that have crossed behind. It may seem like a lot of steps to work out what your cable symbol means, but actually once you've started to do some practice and you've got into the swing of it, you should find that those processes become much more automatic. A bit like learning to change gear when you're driving a car. The first few times you do it, you have to think about every step, but once you've done some more practice, it becomes automatic. I'm now going to show you how to read your cable symbols for cabling without a cable needle. We start off in the same way. We're on row 7, looking at this cable here. How many stitches are involved in total? Well, this is a 3-stitch total cable. We then look at how they're divided into 2 groups by following the diagonal line down the cable. And we've got a group of 2 and a group of 1. So the 2 are going over the 1, leaning towards the left. When we're working with a cable without a cable needle, the right needle tip will be picking up the group of stitches that's on the left at the bottom. We look at the row below to work out what we're doing. So this one stitch is the stitch that will be picked up by the right needle tip. And because the cable is leaning towards the left, we'll be picking up that one stitch from the rear of the work. We then, having picked up that one stitch from the rear of the work, skipping over these two stitches at the beginning, we then will replace them all on the left needle and work across them in the order in which they appear on the cable symbol. So the first one will be a purl and then the next two will be knits, because there's nothing on this diagonal line, it's just blank. So let's look at that in our knitting. These three stitches here are the three stitches that will be involved in the cable. We'll be picking up the one on the left hand side, skipping over the first two on the right. And because the cable is going to be leaning to the left, we're going to be picking it up at the rear of the work. So we put the right needle tip into that stitch at the rear of the work, skipping over the two that were on the end. We then carefully slide the needle out and pick up the two that are hanging before replacing that one on the needle. And we've now changed the order of our stitches. So here are our three cable stitches, 1, 2, 3, and the two knits you can already see are crossing over the purl. So now we just work in order across them. One purl, and two knits. So we're leaning towards the left, there's our purl and two knits. Let's work through the next cable as well. So again, it's 3 stitches wide. We follow the diagonal down to see how the stitches are divided. Always looking on the row below for what's going to be happening in the cable. Again, it's the left-hand group of stitches that we'll be picking up with the right needle tip, and this time we'll be picking up 2 stitches from the left-hand side, skipping over the one on the right. The cable itself is leaning to the right, so we're going to be picking up these 2 knit stitches at the front of the work, which makes total sense because it's those knit stitches that will be going across the front of the fabric. Then looking across the cable symbol, the 2 stitches here are blank on that diagonal, so they're knitted, and then there's one purl at the end. So once we've rearranged our stitches, they'll be worked knit, knit, purl across that symbol. So here we are on our knitting. 1, 2, 3 stitches involved in the cable. We've got the left-hand group of these 2, and there's the right-hand group of 1. We're going to pick up the 2 on the left from the front using the right needle tip, and we're going to pull the left needle tip out, pick up the hanging stitch and put the stitches from the right back onto the left. So we now have our 1, 2, 3 stitches on the left needle tip now in the right order, in the correct order to work for the cable, which is worked as knit, knit, purl. And again, the knit stitches are leaning across towards the right, and they have crossed over the one purl stitch that's gone behind. We're now ready to work this cable here. So how many stitches are involved? It's right the way across the width of the chart this time, so it's all 6 stitches. What are the groups they're divided into? Well, we follow the diagonal down. So we can see we're divided into two groups of three. It's this left-hand group that will be picked up by the right needle tip, and because it's going to be leaning towards the right, those 3 stitches will be picked up from the front of the work. Then looking across the cable symbol itself, there are no other symbols on there, it's all just blank, which tells us that all of these stitches will now be knitted. Let's look at that in our knitting now. Here are our 6 stitches involved in our cable. They're divided into a group of 3 and a group of 3. We'll skip over the group of 3 on the right and pick up the group of 3 on the left from the front of the work. We then pull the left needle tip out of all the stitches, pick up the hanging ones and slide the ones from the right tip back onto the left. They get a bit squished up once they're crossed. Okay, all 6 stitches are safely on the needle there, they're right on top of each other, and we just have to knit across them now that we've got them in the right order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And you can see that we have a group of 3 going across, leaning towards the right, in the same way as the picture on our cable symbol. As with cabling with a cable needle, it does look like a lot of steps to work out when you're beginning, but as you get into the practice and get into the swing of it, you'll find that many of those thought processes become automatic, and you obviously don't need to go through highlighting your symbols, you can just read straight from them. I hope this video has helped you to decipher cable chart symbols, either with or without a cable needle. If you'd like to know more about A Year of Techniques, do visit our website acknitwear.co.uk, and why not try something new today?